I think in the nonprofit world, a suggested donation model, it goes a long way. I'm talking about donations and not necessarily about registration fee, but I think it's the same principle that oftentimes people see something and they believe it's valuable, and they'll oftentimes give you more than what they need to because they believe in the value of what you're doing, or because it's worth that to them.
Kevin, welcome to Grow Healthy, Help People, the podcast that Accordis puts out. We talk with great nonprofit leaders that are having an impact. How's your day going, and where are you calling in from today?
I'm good. I'm here in North Springfield, Pennsylvania, right along Lake Erie. I'm the executive director at Camp Judson, and I'm here at camp where we have 122 acres that are right on Lake Erie. God has blessed us to be where we are. Best sunsets in the world. So
I can imagine. So Lake Erie is also the Canadian border, right?
Yeah, it's the border. It's probably 20 miles north of us, somewhere out there in the lake.
Out there in the water. And
Right.
So directly, just for reference, directly west of you, more or less, is Detroit, and northeast of you is Toronto, right?
Yeah. We're located we're about an hour and a half from downtown Cleveland, about 2 hours from Buffalo, and about two and a half hours north of Pittsburgh.
Pennsylvania is one of those deceiving states. You think of the New England states as being small, and you look at Pennsylvania like, well, that's a huge, huge state. It goes a long way. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about.
We sometimes get calls from people in New York and New Jersey looking for a camp facility, and we have to explain to them, no, you realize that we're 6 to 7 hours from where you are.
Yeah, it's not a quick drive over for a day.
No.
Yeah. So tell me about Camp Judson. You mentioned, you and I were talking earlier, it's founded in 1949. What is the big mission of the camp?
So our mission is twofold. We're a Christian camp, and our primary mission is we want to help each one of our campers and retreat guests take the next step in their relationship with Christ, whatever that is for them, to meet them where they're at and help them take that next step. And then additionally, we want to model and foster healthy relationships between people. Our biggest program is summer camp. Yeah. And, for many kids, for many teens, healthy relationships, unfortunately, are not something that they see modeled, as frequently as we would hope in their lives, whether it's, with their peers, whether it's in their families or elsewhere in their community. And so we want to give them a picture of how Jesus calls us to live in relationship with one another, about how we treat each other, about how we forgive, about how we solve conflict, and, about how we are with each other, and that they can take back home and seek to emulate those things and put those things into practice in their relationships when they get back home.
That's great. So I think when you say camp, most people immediately go back to the camp they went to growing up. Like that is the reference for camp, because, at 45 years old, you don't find yourself going to camp very often. So when I think of camp, I'm thinking of recreation, fun activities. It sounds like, though, a lot of what you guys also do in addition to the fun is meaningful conversations and like next steps in life, helping people develop as Christians, as people, in relationships. Tell me about some of the programs that you run there, the recreation, and then also some of the conversations you try to foster.
Yeah, so there's three camping programs that we run. We run an overnight, kind of a classic traditional overnight camp program, where kids come and they stay in cabins. We have a subset of those of the overnight camp program where kids actually live in tents for a week. And then in addition to that, we have a day camp program where kids, mom and dad drop their kids off at 8:30 in the morning, pick them up at 4:30 in the afternoon for a week. And we also have a family camp program where families can come and do summer camp together. And so what each of those programs look like is, there's a Bible study component, there's a spiritual component to each one of them. So we do Bible study in the morning, we do a campfire vespers time in the evening, which is, with singing and worship and, a message devotional, that sort of a thing. And then, there's, lots of classic camp activities. We have a swimming pool, and the kids go in every day. We have a pond where they canoe and kayak and paddleboard and fish. We're on Lake Erie, so kids get a chance to swim in Lake Erie, and we have a jet ski that we take kids tubing on the lake. We have a climbing tower and a zip line. We do archery and crafts. We have a hobby farm with where we have some smaller size farm animals, as well as we grow some small vegetable farm as well. And so, to kind of help kids learn about where food comes from. And we do lots of outdoor education as well. And then lots of, games and skits and activities. And, sometimes people ask, well, what kind of camp are you? There are camps that are sports camps, and there are camps that are horse camps, or, in a whole spectrum. We're kind of a traditional camp, and all of those activities, we want kids to have fun. We want kids to grow spiritually, and also to grow in confidence, and become more independent. Learn how to develop the confidence to be away from mom and dad. To try new things. There's so many cool things that come with the summer camp experience about that help kids to grow. And so that's primarily what we do. We also do retreat rentals for, church groups, community groups, youth groups, etc., where we're just kind of the host. But summer camp is the heart of what we do.
Yeah. So I would imagine you have a lot of counselors that come in. Tell me about some of the key aspects, or the ways and the reasons you hire certain counselors. Like, what are you looking for when you're hiring counselors to come work there for the summer?
Well, the number one thing is character, because you can't model, you can't teach what you don't have yourself. So, the primary thing for us is we look for, for young adults and for teenagers who are, have a relationship with Jesus and are seeking to grow in relationship. And that's number one. Number two is that we look for kind of a chemistry. Are they a good fit for summer camp? Making sure that summer camp is an intense environment, because you live and you work and you play with the same people for 9 weeks. It's an intensive community for summer staff, and we want to make sure that people are bought in on that, so that they can, so that we know that they're going to make it through the summer, and and we provide supports for that and stuff. But so chemistry is a piece, and then there's a competence piece. We want to make sure that our staff have the maturity to make decisions and care for kids, and because parents are trusting us with their kids, and we need to make sure that we're good stewards of that, and we're putting, the staff that we're putting in place are people who are going to make good decisions and be good role models for kids and for teens.
Yeah, that's great. So you said kids and teens. So you guys are the summer programs are from what age to what age?
Our day camp program starts as young as kindergarten and goes up through fourth grade. Our overnight camps start from second grade and go all the way up through high school. So we only have, we run day camps each camp session, but our overnight camp sessions, it's one age group at a time. So we'll have senior high camp 1 week, and then junior high camp another week, junior / upper elementary camp another week, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you're not having second graders and seniors at high school at the same camp.
Correct. Yeah, there are some camps out there that that's how they operate.
So Kevin, tell me a little bit of your background and how you got into the nonprofit space, because you're running a sizable organization. You've got full-time staff, you've got payroll, you got a lot you're doing. Yeah. Did you study that, or how did you end up in this space?
That's a really good question. So let me start this way. So my history with Camp Judson is kind of personal with me, and it kind of goes back to, it's not a family business, but in some ways it can kind of feel that way. When I was born, my dad was actually the camp director. The job looked different then, and that was 50 plus years ago. And so I lived on site until I was about 5 years old.
Really?
And then
so your early memories are there.
Yes. Yeah. Some of my first memories, same house, various places on the property.
How neat.
And then when I was about 5, my dad got a different job. We moved off property. We moved about 10 minutes from here. But this is where I went to summer camp. And then when I was in high school, I started working here in the summer and on weekends, helping out with retreat groups and stuff. And so when I was in high school and college and then later in seminary, I was a summer staffer. And then after I finished seminary, I was a youth and children's pastor for a little over 9 years, but, camp was very much, one of the main influences in my life in shaping not just my faith, but also who I am as a person. And, it's where I learned about, learned how to work, learned what leadership looks like, learned what community and real friendship looks like and stuff like that. And so that never really went away. That was part of part of what was important to me as a youth and children's pastor. And my father's successor had been here for 32 years from the time my dad had left, and he retired in 2009. Wasn't really sure that I was interested in the position, but after some nudging from a number of camp friends of kind of like, felt like maybe God was trying to tell me something, and so I applied for the position, and here I am in the role.
So you've been there for 16, 17 years now?
Yeah. This is my 17th year.
Okay.
As far as you think about leadership and organizational skills, but you really don't know what you're know about what you're doing until you're in the chair.
Yeah.
So there was a lot I learned about nonprofit and business stuff in the first year or two, because at heart I'm a program guy. That's
you knew how to get the kids out in the field and have fun and teach the kids, but when you had to figure out liability insurance and waivers, you're like, this is a whole different deal.
Yes. Those can be the things that, the days that suck the life out of me. Yeah. But and over the last 15 years, done a lot of, I guess, nonprofit training stuff through local university, as well as through the Christian Camp and Conference Association that provides a lot of, training opportunities for camp professionals, because a lot of camping professionals are people who are like me, who are coming from the ministry world or the church world and moving into the camp world, or have only been in the camp world and haven't experienced things outside of that. So that that ministry nonprofit edge sometimes can be a challenge sometimes, both because it's ministry and people view it that way, but at the same time very much needs to function like a business.
I know.
Because of all the operational things that come along with it.
Yeah. So the phrase I hear frequently is, I didn't start this organization or didn't take this job so I could do paperwork and payroll and accounting all the time.
Right.
Or that's really why Accord is the company that I have. That's what we do. We do back office for nonprofits, because so many leaders like you go, man, I know how to save babies or train pastors or save trees. I know how to do that. I know how to make sure the water is pure in this whatever area. But I don't know how to do receipts. I don't know how to do database. I don't want to figure out the online liability waiver release from every parent that comes this summer. That's not what I want to spend my time doing. And so Accord is our company. That's what we do. So Kevin, as you're navigating that, or as others that are watching this podcast are navigating that, reach out to us. At the end of this podcast, we'll put a link to our website as well as Camp Judson's website. CampJudson.com is the website to learn more there. So Kevin, tell me a little bit about what you hope 5 years from now looks like at Camp Judson. You guys have been around for 75 years or whatever. It's a long time. What do you hope the future looks like?
I think, one of the things that had, we were founded by a group of American Baptist churches. And as those, unfortunately, some of those churches have declined and aged, as churches often do, and go through life cycles and stuff. And so we're the camper base that we see and the retreat group base that we see is much more diversified. It's not just within one denominational framework. And so we're learning how to navigate that and how to broaden our support base. And so I would hope that 5 years from now that we a couple things, that we've strengthened that base of support, that we have.
Do you mean they're coming to camp, or they're donating or sending volunteers? Both. Okay.
Yeah, both. Because as with many organizations that are the age that we are, we're seeing, that baby boom generation that really is where the bulk of our financial support comes from. They're getting older and passing away, and millennials and Gen Z, have to a degree different considerations and different criteria when they're looking for organizations that they support. And so learning how to do that sort of fundraising and make those sort of connections, as well as to reach more kids, because the mission doesn't change, but the context always does. So hopefully, in 5 years we're stronger and we're in a better place than we are today.
That's great. Be encouraged. The work you're doing is good work. I know it's not easy. One last question. How do you charge for services? A lot of nonprofits, they only raise donations, and all of their revenue comes from donations. I think you guys probably charge for services as well as donations, as well as having a 75-year-old property, 120 acres. That's huge. That's incredible property. I'm guessing that's paid off, decades ago, I'm guessing. So how does the revenue model work that you're having to run on here?
Yeah, so you're right. So the simplest way to explain it is our revenue is kind of in, let's say there's three big buckets. There's some smaller ones like our camp store and things like that, but that's not a huge amount of revenue. So the first revenue bucket is program revenue. So and the largest section of that is summer camp. Summer camp, as well as retreats that we offer, etc. And I'll come back to that in a second about how we price those things. The second bucket is rentals. So we have, that's income that we have from, groups and organizations that are coming in, and our function is primarily hospitality. We're cooking for them, we're providing them with space, we're hauling the garbage, we're fixing things when they break, etc. And so that's the second bucket, and that's priced kind of like, generally we try to shoot for what, a little more than what it costs us for those things. So there's a little bit of margin there. And then the third bucket is donations. So we have a donor base, of churches and individuals and businesses that give and that kind of underwrite our operations and also supply scholarship funds, help us pay for capital improvements, replacing roofs, replacing a deck, those kinds of things, or if we're doing a capital campaign, that's where that comes from, like we did a few years ago to replace our pool. But those donations also underwrite our summer camp program. So, if you go to our camp page, you'll see that we actually have two rates for summer camp programs. One is, this is what the actual cost is. And then we have a second rate, which is a subsidized rate. And we let families choose whatever works for them. We have some families who, camp is important to us and it's a value for us. And, and we have the funds to cover the full cost. And so we don't want you to underwrite our camp, save that money, use that to underwrite somebody else. We don't need that. And so they choose that rate. But the other rate tier is subsidized by those donations. And so, a full week of camp for us is, it's $640, but that subsidized rate is $465. And so, because we don't want the cost of camp to be a reason that, a child or a teen is unable to come. And so, and like I said, we also have a scholarship program that, generally speaking, somewhere between 35% of our campers receive some sort of scholarship assistance from us. And, that 465, that's a reach for them. And so, our scholarship donations are covering, maybe 250 or 300 of that, because we want every kid to go to camp. We don't want it to be my family, or a family that, family has 4 kids, $1,600, $1,600, to $2,000 for summer camp. That's steep, but, and so we don't want them to miss out on what God can do in their lives and the things that can happen for them in terms of growth. because their family can't afford it. So
Yeah.
that's a value decision that we've made, that
I
we
love
want
that
every kid to
business
go.
model. I heard a church one time say it was a pay what you can.
Hmm.
Like, don't ever walk out of our bookstore and not be
Yeah.
without something in your hand because you didn't have the $12. Take it. It's on us. I love the model you have. Here's the full bore price, but if you can't pay that, here's the discounted price, and you choose as a family. You don't have to send us your income. You choose. Just choose
Yeah.
whichever one you can do. I
Yeah.
love that model.
Yeah, and I think in the nonprofit world, I think that that suggested donation model, it goes a long way.
Hmm.
I'm talking about donations and not necessarily about registration fee, but I think it's the same principle, that oftentimes people see something and they believe it's valuable, and they'll oftentimes give you more than what they need to, because they believe in the value of what you're doing, or because it's worth that to them. And so, sometimes we don't have because we don't ask, or because we set the bar too low. So, yeah.
I'm really encouraged by what you're doing. Kevin, thanks for your time today. Thanks for being on the podcast. And
Thanks for having
if
me.
someone wants to get involved in Camp Judson in some way, shape, or form, I'm sure they can find more information at campjudson.com.
Yep.
And is it most of your campers are from local areas, or people coming from across the country?
Yeah, most of our campers are from Western Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and Northeastern Ohio, some from Southwestern New York. We tend to draw within a 2-hour radius of us.
Okay.
So, kind of between Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo,
Yeah.
probably more concentrated in Pennsylvania, but
Yeah.
that's generally the area we draw from.
So people can find out more at campjudson.com. Thank you,
Yep.
Kevin, for being on the podcast today. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Uh-huh.